We're breaking down simple and effective electric guitar mix moves that can quickly elevate the quality of your productions and sound something like this. Adding the plugins back. Well, if you're new to the channel, thanks so much for stopping by. My name's Christian Hale. I'm a Billboard charting producer-songwriter right here in Nashville, Tennessee. These electric guitar mix techniques I'm about to show you are exactly what I use here in the studio day in, day out, and are the exact same techniques I've used over a whole bunch of streams, my music being licensed by a whole bunch of major brands and networks. So let's jump into the session here and start breaking down these electric guitar mix moves. So let me first start by giving you a look and a preview at the song and session we're going to be demonstrating on here. First off, just scanning at the session, you see it's a pretty large, dense session. This is a CCM worship kind of production. There's kind of a hybrid of real live track stuff as well as a lot of programming. I feel like that's pretty characteristic of where a lot of music is at the time of making this video. But from an electric guitar standpoint, all of these red tracks right here are my electric guitar tracks. Here in a bit, I'll get into why there's actually so many electric guitar tracks. That's actually part of the mix strategy here. But just doing a little bit of verse chorus of the instrumental here in context, here's the kind of thing we're working with, and really pay attention to what these electric guitars sound like in the context of the mix. I'm pretty happy with how those electric guitars sound in the context of the track. You obviously heard them in solo as well. They sound really good. But for a quick A/B demonstration of the plugins that I'm about to show you and what those are doing, I'm going to play that same segment of music and start with all the plugins off on all the electric guitars and then add those in to go back and forth. Here's what that sounds like. Plugins bypassed. Plugins on. Adding the plugins back. So to me, when I bypass the mix plugins, it kind of just sounds like the electric guitars go away and go underwater. And then when I add all the plugins back in, it's kind of like, there's my electric guitars. Like, it's not anything over the top, not anything excessive, but it's just kind of like, oh yeah, like there's the electric guitars being nice and forward and pronounced and sitting right in the mix and kind of cutting through right in the waves and right in the frequency ranges that I want them to. But before we actually break down what the plugins are on the electric guitars, I want to bring a couple things to your attention. First, like I said, when we first jumped into the session here, there's quite a few electric guitar tracks. And it really, if you look at it, like there are a lot of electric guitar tracks in the red, but really the main reason why I have so many electric tracks is I've split them off to mix each section in the song slightly different. Like in the intro over here, there's these like really 2 tracks. And then over here in the verse, like there's just 2 or 3 tracks over here doing like more of this ambient kind of thing. And then over here in the chorus, we have a left, right of diamonds, and then a left, right of a rhythm, and then kind of one ambient track over here, and then the one counter melody thing. So the most is happening in the chorus, but really it's just 4 different elements soloed up. Sounds like this. But really, I just want to split those off primarily for level and subtle differences in treatment from track to track. Like, I could probably have like half as many electric guitar tracks here, but like if, I got rhythm diamonds over here and like plucky second verse stuff over here, I'm probably going to have to do more volume automation and, maybe panning automation, some stuff like that. And but by just splitting off the tracks, and I do that in way more stuff than just electric guitars, but splitting off the tracks allows me to just really quickly on that track treat it a certain way, and then if a similar part comes into a different part of the song, like I can just new track, slightly different treatment, slightly different level, and have to do less automation. So that's really the main reason why I'm doing what I'm doing and why there's so many electric guitar tracks to begin with. The next thing I want to point out is this chain of plugins is really designed for post amp processing. So I didn't play these electric guitars. I hired them out by a brilliant guitar player here in Nashville named Luke Sullivan. Shout out to Luke. Go check out his work. He's one of those geniuses that's an insane bass, guitar, auxiliary player. He's toured and played with a whole bunch of bands, done a bunch of great stuff in the studio. Shout out to Luke. He's amazing. So if you don't have the pleasure of having a brilliant session guitar player on a song, this chain of plugins will still work for you. But if you're using software, this would be after your amp modeler, like Guitar Rig, for instance, or whatever amp modeler you're using. Or if you are recording with a real amp, this chain of plugins will work great for you after the real amp like this. Or if you do something like what I do right over here, I have my little pedal board that runs into a Strymon Iridium amp modeler and then records straight into Pro Tools when I'm doing like the real amp thing, but not actually a real amp. I'll use the same chain of plugins here. So this video really isn't designed to get into specific tones and amp modeling Guitar Rig like that. I do want to point that out, that all of this is for post amp simulation. But again, I've used this on a variety of stuff and it'll work great for you. But again, just wanted to point that out. So actually getting into and taking a look at the chain of plugins. So really what's pretty much going on every single track here is actually a track preset that I've come up with called EGT Starting Point OTT. So this is a great pro tip for you guys. Like anytime you come up with a chain of plugins that you like in a song, save it as a track preset, make that thing easily recallable. I think pretty much every DAW does that at this point. So EGT Start OTT, you see like right here I have, a couple sub variations of this, but EGT Start OTT, like if I just type that into Pro Tools, it loads this thing up right here, which like as you can kind of visually see is pretty much what's going on all these tracks down here. But as far as the chain of plugins itself, let's demonstrate on this chorus rhythm track. We got everything bypassed, and I'll show you exactly how things are set one plugin at a time, so you can go steal these settings, apply them to your own music. This should hopefully work really, really well for you. So the very first thing I have is the Waves API 550 EQ. I'm just doing a subtle boost up here at 7K. This thing provides a little bit of analog color, which I really like, and just a little bit of that upper mid-range, kind of top end 7K boost, really subtly. We'll start with the API off and then add that in on this track. So here's with it off, then adding it in. Yeah, to me, it's just kind of the first thing in the chain that one, it gives it that great API color that I love so much, but it's kind of taken it from like I said, to me, these untreated guitars sound just ever so slightly underwater, and I want to help them bring that mid-range forward, the part of the guitar that really is going to speak through the mix. And that 7K bump with the API color is like the first part of the process. It's the first chain in the process that is kind of pushing us that direction, helping the guitars get above water, so to speak. So API 550 by Waves does a great thing, like what that's doing. Next thing is I have the good old faithful FabFilter Pro Q3. If I only had to work with one EQ for the rest of my life, it would be FabFilter Pro Q3. I think a bunch of you guys out there feel that way too. Drop in the comments, like, could you live without FabFilter Pro Q3? Because I know I couldn't. It's on all sorts of stuff. Like the guys at FabFilter just figured that thing out, didn't they? And yeah, it's just so good. And really what that's doing is just kind of a low cut around 81 hertz here, and then, a couple moves here, like these exact frequencies will change a little bit from song to song, but like a 2 to 300 hertz cut and then like a 5 to 600 hertz cut. And look, like this is 1 dB, 1.5 dB, like as if I could even tell a difference is like what that sounds like, pretending like I know what I'm doing, right? No, but for real, like really the low cut is the main purpose of this right here. You probably could do some of that in the API, and you really could probably make the notches there in the API, but I just like the Fab Filter Pro Q. We'll start with it off and add it in so you can hear what that's doing. Yeah, just kind of gets rid of some of that woofy lower mid range, tubby low end. Like I like what that low end sounds like in solo, but in the context of the track where we got basses, synth basses, like low big fat kick drums, like don't really need all that stuff. So just kind of sculpting things again, pushing us like above water metaphorically, and letting that upper mid range part of the guitars speak to start to cut through. Follow that up with a good old faithful Wave CLA3A. There's two Waves plugins on this chain, and this is just doing some subtle compression, but I really like the CLA3A on guitars. Use this thing for years now. I think it works. I think it sounds good, like I said, specifically on guitars. Kind of got it set like this. I'll add it in and we can see how much the needle's pinging on this thing. I'll adjust this a little bit from song to song, but pretty much these settings right here work on, quite a few different gain structures and input levels of guitars. So here's the good old faithful CLA3A, starting with it off, then we'll add it in. Yeah, and that's just doing a nice compression thing. But again, like I feel like what I like about that is the color. Like there's something to the color, the way that that's moving the needle and compressing a little bit, that's just pushing the upper mid range forward. Like again, that's a lot of what I'm going for here in this chain of plugins. And so really like what that thing's doing. Sounds great. Following that up with a plugin I love so much that I think is so good. Like I think this thing is $40. Go get this plugin. I have no affiliation with JST as of the time I'm making this video, but shout out to JST. This JST Clip plugin is awesome. I use this on my vocal chain, on my lead vocal aux, which you can actually see me break down in part 3 of the vocal production series down in the description below. Use this thing on basses, 808s, but we're here to talk about electric guitars, and clearly I use this on pretty much every single electric guitar track, as you can see as I am combing through the tracks there. Set like this 99% of the time, and JST Clip just does its good JST Clip kind of things. We'll start with it off and then add it in, and you can hear all of its goodness. I mean, I love that thing. It's doing a good move. So for a long time, my electric guitar chain stopped right here. And what I'll say is if a guitar has a lot of gain, if it's a brighter electric guitar, like if there's just like a lot of stuff like cutting through, if the gain structure's higher, sometimes I'll stop right there. And you can stop right here a lot of times and it's going to sound really good. But sometimes just because I like that little bit of extra over the top, I pull open the good old faithful OTT over the top plugin, but in a way, kind of responsible dial back settings. So you guys know over the top, I'm sure, OTT, but if you don't know OTT, this is a free plugin by Expert. This thing sounds absolutely amazing. And when I first started using OTT though, like I was using it at like 100% mix, and like here, let me duplicate this and just go factory default the settings and show you what too much OTT can do to electric guitar, or anything for that matter. Sounds like this on full blast, like not what you want. And I was actually just talking to a buddy about this last week. Like, he's a super smart, brilliant producer, and he was like, OTT just like ruins every sound. How do you use it? Well, I'm about to show you how to use OTT to get that height factor, but without it ruining the sound. Two things you got to pay attention to. One is this depth knob. Like, if you want responsible OTT, kind of anything 20 and below will work well for you. And this plugin does do so much that even at those lower mixes, it works really well. So in the case of this, I got it at 14%. And then the upward and downward, like, that's some other kind of mix knob. Again, not 100% sure like really what that's doing, but go play with the depth, play with that upward and downward, and you'll find that you have really nice usable OTT. Sometimes I'll slightly play with the EQ too. Like, if I want a little more mid range, like, I'll bump that there. A little more low end, I'll bump the low end. But usually on the electric guitar chain on this EGT start preset, I keep the OTT just sort of sitting like this, and it works well for me. And so with the OTT off, I'm going to get rid of this guy right here because that was just our ruin the sound demonstration. But starting with the responsible OTT off and then adding it in, we have something that sounds like this. Now that you've seen the plugins, I'm going to play that same excerpt and start with all the plugins off and then add them in. So again, you really kind of knowing what each individual plugin is now doing, you can hear what the whole chain of plugins is doing. Sounds totally underwater to me. But adding them back, like, it just works. And like I said, like, I use this on a whole bunch of styles, genres, like that EGT start OTT, which you've now seen the settings, and you can go take and steal and pull it into your own productions. Like, post an amp or amp simulator, like, it kind of just works. I showed you there. I do though want to show you a couple things that I'll sometimes do to take this even further, as well as one move I do like when the chain like is doing what I like, but like maybe a little too much, and it actually comes into play on this rhythm 2 left and right. So I have the good old faithful chain here, but you can look and see that I have Soothe actually at the end of the chain. Whoops, so you can see, these are just lefts and rights because it's worship music and CCM, and like they love the stacks of guitars and width, and yeah, that's just the name of the game when you're producing this stuff. But the chain, it brought that upper mid range forward, but like I felt like maybe it brought it forward a little bit too much. So I'm doing a little bit of Soothe here, like really kind of in this wide upper mid range, sort of peaking around 3K there. Just sort of dialed in like this. I will on this track here start with the Soothe off and show you what that's doing. It's probably going to be subtle, but let's see. Yeah, like you hear how that upper mid-range height factor is still there, like from the plugins, but like then it almost feels like the whole thing is just rounded off. That's the power of Soothe right there. So that's a technique you guys can employ too. Like if you try the chain of plugins and you're like, ah man, little too hyped up, a little too much upper mid range, try a little bit of Soothe on the end of it and see what that might do for you. Tends to work pretty well for me, like it did there. The final thing I want to point out to you though is an effect move, and I use this technique all the time. Like I use this on perk, I use this on synths quite a bit, synths and keys, ear candy. Like I do what I'm about to show you on that all the time, but I use it quite a bit on electric guitars too. And it's actually something that shows up in the second verse here on this plucky kind of palm muted. These couple of tracks right here, those sound like this in solo, and I'll show you in context too. Yeah, just those plucky ear candy tracks. So like again, pretty different part than the heavy rhythm tracks, but like I'm not lying, guys. Like it's the same chain of plugins set kind of like the same way. It's EGT starting point OTT track preset. Like take it, cop it, make it your own. Um, but if you pay close attention here, you see that I am taking this track right here that's pan left. So the guitar player, Luke, he sent me stereo track, but I panned it to the left here. So took the right to the middle, kept the left left. And if I bypass the effect track, which we're about to talk about, we have something that sounds like this. Like pretty clearly should be happening in your left ear, unless you have your headphones on backwards or something, then it's happening out of your right ear, but it should be coming out of the left side. So we got that going on right there. But here's the thing that I do all the time, and I think this adds just such a cool, unique little stereo interest, like so simple but effective. I then pan to in the case of this song, a delay send, but I'll do this with reverb, I'll do this with chorus, like I'll do this with pretty much any effect you would send to. I'm gonna send that pan to the right. So I got the track pan left, and then I'm sending to an effect where the send is pan to the right. And then I'm just sending it to this Echo Boy, doing a little eighth note delay, followed up by a little bit of chorus to make it a little more interesting with a little bit of EQ tone shaping on the thing. But listen to what the left pan track sent to an effect to the right does, especially on these interesting rhythmic kind of parts. Check this out. Without it. Yeah, and that just adds such subtle interest that like it's a more of a felt than a heard thing. And actually, I have over here in this kind of complementary part, I have that track pan to the right, but then I'm sending to this same delay track pan to the left. And so like there's almost just like controlled chaos metaphorically, I guess, like in the stereo field. And yeah, like on AirPods, on headphones, I feel like a listener's never gonna probably notice that, like nor should they care. But like us producer nerds, like that's a really cool thing to add interest and feel to your track. Check out what the two together sound like. Yeah, so I really love that move. Again, use this on a whole bunch of different stuff. A place where I use it quite a bit, I know we're talking guitars, but like really kind of drivey synths. Like if I pan a synth one way in the mix and like add some dirt to it, then sending that to a really wet and washy reverb over on the other side, maybe also with some drive, with some chorus, with some thermal, with some good sauce on it. That's a really cool thing to like not just have like buzzy driven synth, but like still have that, but then like have washy stereo goodness. So I mean, yeah, that's it right there. Like you saw the chain of plugins work really well, and you can take my word for it that like this is pretty much what I use on all sorts of styles, genres, guitars. I think just so far on this channel alone, in my video series on how to make a song like One Republic, you saw a super similar workflow on a very different kind of song. And I think as well on my video where I actually mixed a country song from start to finish, it's a 3-hour uncut video, you saw that same exact chain of plugins at work right there. It just works. So take these concepts, bring them into your own workflow. And if this video is helpful, hit that thumbs up, drop me a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. I'm so excited about the future of this YouTube channel. I've received so much positive feedback from you guys, and it seems like so many of you guys are getting so much value out of this. And like, that's really the goal of this whole thing, right? Like I wanted to create the resource that I wanted at the beginning of my music career over a decade ago now. So, you know, I've been at this music thing, writing, producing, mixing full-time here in Nashville. I've been fortunate enough to have some wins. I've had way more failures than I've had successes. And like at the end of the day, it's just about getting a little bit better every single day. Every song's a new opportunity to learn something. Every day is a new opportunity to just get 1% better at the craft. Like that's what I'm doing over here. And I might be a little bit further ahead than some of you guys, but like I remember back when I was just starting out, like, I don't know. I'm no different than that same kid really, of just like loving the process and just wanting to get a little bit better every day. So that's the purpose of this channel. That's what I hope to bring to you guys. Just knowledge and insight from doing this thing day in, day out, speaking to you, speaking to my younger self. So thanks as always for watching. Again, I hope this video brought you tons of value. Here's to making better music, making our electric guitars sound just a little bit better. And until then, we'll see you guys again real soon.